would like to give a warm welcome to Laura, who will be sharing with us a lot of insight on how to get the most out of our side hustle. A couple of quick information about housekeeping and the Museum of Brands. Obviously, for all of you, there is a ticket included to come and visit the Museum of Brands once we are allowed to reopen. So if you just quote side hustle at the time of your booking, you will be able to visit, and ticket price is included in tonight's webinar. We've muted everyone, and you feel free to unmute yourself. I'm sure the session will be interactive. And this tonight's webinar is supported by the Marketers Trust, who are actually supporting our entire professional development program in 2021. So a huge thanks to them, and a huge thanks to Laura. So over to you, Laura.
Thank you. Well, nice to meet everybody. As I said, if I can see your faces, it's lovely, but I appreciate it's that time in the evening that you may have other things going on. So I totally understand if the cameras aren't on, but as I said, it's always lovely to see a smiling face back at you when you're talking in one of these types of sessions. So thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Laura. Thanks, Nicole. Good to see your face. I suppose I wear lots of different hats, which is probably one of the reasons why I was asked to come and do this talk for you today. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown of my story, and most importantly, I'm sure I've got some tips of things that I did and things that I didn't do that I wish I had done, that I think hopefully will benefit you guys. But the first thing I wanted to find out was, what is the kind of side hustle level here? Have we got people that have side hustles? Have we got people that are thinking about a side hustle? Have we got people that side hustles are overtaking the day job? Where are we at the moment in terms of side hustles? So, because there's so few of us, it would be great if you just took yourselves on mute and told me. If you don't feel comfortable with that, I get it. Please pop your answer in the chat function that you'll find at the bottom of the bar. But yeah, if anyone's feeling brave and wants to just share those words so it isn't just me talking at you for the foreseeable future, I'd love to hear if you have a side hustle, if you're thinking about setting one up, or maybe you've got one in full swing.
I wouldn't say I have a side hustle. I have a side hustle interest. As in, there are a couple of things that I'm interested in that I always think it would be interesting to pursue, but I've always been too much of a chicken, I think, to sort of actually properly going for it, even on the side. So,
okay, thank you for sharing. Okay, so got some ideas, but not quite there. I think from the look of it as well, we've got, that's probably a good way to put it, embryonic stage of a food business. So brilliant. Thank you for that. Again, thinking of a side hustle, and one is just starting. So hopefully that's one step further. Okay, so we've got some people coming with us today on this journey of saying, okay, well, I've got some kind of idea. Maybe it's a little bit more fledged than others, but I've got the idea, there's some kind of appetite for doing it, but not quite sure where to go. Okay, that's good for me to get a bit of a sense of where we're at. So I'm going to share my screen now. Now, it'd be great if I could just get a thumbs up from people just to check you can see what I can see. Wonderful, thank you. So as I said, my name is Laura Capell-Abra, and essentially I used to run an events agency. I used to work in marketing. I was managing director of an events agency in West London, and I'd been in that role for 5 years, and I'd previously always worked full time in businesses, and very comfy, very happy there. And I started to get a little bit of itchy feet at kind of around year 4-ish, I guess, in my role. And thought that actually there must be something a little bit different that could entertain me. I felt like I'd kind of taken that role as far as I could. And the next kind of natural career step for me was to go to a bigger agency and become managing director or a different role at a bigger agency. And there was just no part of it that interested me. So I started off on this little bit of a journey and carried on doing the day job without being silly. It paid a decent amount of money. It gave me the opportunity to travel the world. I got involved in lots of fun events. It wasn't a bad job. But actually, I needed something else to entertain me. And I was really looking for something on the side that just interested me and kind of tested my creative skills. What I've now since found is one of the big reasons that people actually pursue side hustles. They feel like they've maybe got a little bit of extra creativity that's not being used as much as it could be. So I decided to start writing a blog. I'd previously written a book, and so I was quite comfortable writing, and I quite like the idea of kind of putting a blog together. Now, this was not a blog to raise money or to make money. This was just a blog for basically my entertainment values. I've never looked at the traffic, and the reason I have, because I think it would be embarrassingly low. I'd imagine probably less than 5 people looked at each one of my blogs, and I'd imagine I was probably 3 of those. Husband, the 4th, and maybe one of my family members, the 5th one. So for me, I set up the blog just to have something to do that wasn't work, wasn't my relationship, wasn't family, something that felt like mine. And that was really important for me. Was I had this job, but in the sense of what I was doing my job, I was giving myself to everybody else all the time. And I wanted something that felt like it was mine. So I started with a blog. And, you know, the blog was fine. It was keeping me entertained. I said it was not going to change the world, but that wasn't really the point of it. And then I decided that I actually wanted to retrain. So I retrained as a coach, as a career coach. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute. Now I've got these skills and I've got this kind of website blog thing going on. Okay, maybe I can do something with that. And essentially, I ended up setting up a coaching and development business, particularly for the kind of creative sector, because I felt there was a bit of an opportunity there. Now, I'm not going to claim this was a side hustle, because by this point, I'd already had a conversation with my management team and said I was probably going to leave, and this is what I was going to do. So the blog was a bit of a side hustle, but then I decided to leave my full-time job and set up a coaching and development company. So that was just essentially a career change rather than a side hustle. So things were good. I started off, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never run my own business before, as much as I was managing director in an agency. I had lots of very clever people around me doing very clever things. And all of a sudden, I was on my own trying to work out what it meant to actually run a business entirely on my own. And also that real big challenge, how you get clients, which again, I just briefed people before and they kind of did it for me. And now I had to find myself in a situation where I had to work this out myself. So I went through this process and managed to grow the business. And I've given myself a time frame. I said, I need to be able to pay my bills within a year. And if I can't pay them within a year, then I am going to hold my hands up and say, I tried, I did the best I could, but it wasn't going to work for me. So I'd go back to a full-time job. And I kind of had that mindset right from the very beginning, that I'm not too proud to say it failed. I'm going to do that. Anyway, thankfully, the business didn't fail. And actually, I managed to pay my mortgage every month. And that was a big relief. And I managed to eat more than baked beans. So all was good there as well. But as I was doing that, I had this little inkling in the back of my head that all the coaching sessions I was doing, or a lot of the coaching sessions I was doing, there was a lot of talk about stress and mental health and poor well-being. And it kept kind of triggering in the back of my head that actually there was something in this. I was doing all these coaching sessions. I kind of felt like I was trying to help every person individually and kind of change everybody's world one person at a time. And when I actually had a bit of chance to reflect, a bit of probably self-coaching, I remembered, I've not really forgotten, but I kind of acknowledged the fact that back in my mid-20s, I'd experienced burnout in my role. And I'd gone back into the industry and loved it for many more years. And then I thought back and actually thought about my role as managing director in an agency. And I'd had 2 of my team go off on sick leave with stress as well. And so it started to kind of really kind of start gelling in my head that there's something here. This is happening, and I'm not really sure who's here trying to solve this. There's lots of charities doing some great stuff, but actually, how many people are working with businesses trying to stop the problem in the workplace? So I had a little bit of a side hustle growing. So essentially, I had this thought coming on in my head that there's something here, there's something that needs to be done. And it was quite a big passion project at the time. And essentially, what I wanted to do was I wanted to do a piece of research. I'm a bit of a data number geek, and I like to know the facts and figures about stuff. And so for me, I want to know, okay, how big an issue is this stress thing? You know, this small thing of stress that we now can laugh about being huge. At the time, we didn't know much about it. So I wanted to do a piece of research, find out a little bit more. I then put together a logo after the piece of research, thinking, well, if I'm going to write a white paper kind of report, I should probably call it something. And then I should have a logo, and I should probably have a URL just to host the PDF and stuff like that. So, right, okay. So set all that up and launched the results, and then got having lots of conversations with people about the results. And I started working with a group of my peers, and we essentially, you know, all voluntarily started to help businesses look at what the current situation with stress is in their business, and how that could move forward into improvements. And we started to do all this for free. And about a year and a half in, I realized that that was probably a really silly idea. For somebody that in theory was quite a good business person, I was like, hang on a minute, I'm running a business in essence here that I don't charge anyone for. I have to pay for it every single month and all the costs that are associated with it. Yet this isn't a business. So I had the kind of final acknowledgement that I should probably set it up as a business. So this side hustle started to kind of grow and grow and grow. And even then, I was still only spending kind of the odd few hours a week in the evenings and some weekends on it because I had this other business going on as well. So this side hustle started to kind of generate a lot more attention and also require a lot more of my attention as well. So that grew and grew. And then last year, as the world turned upside down, as we're all very, very well aware of, I had another little inkling in my head that there was an opportunity for something else. And so something that I'd been working on for the last 4 or 5 years in the background as kind of part of my coaching program was this idea of a different approach to work-life balance. And I'd kind of been talking to some of my clients about it, and we've kind of been doing something every so often with it, but I hadn't really ever pushed it. And then essentially, I decided enough was enough last year. I think, as with probably most of you, it was a bit of an effort-based year, wasn't it? Like everything was hard. Actually, there was probably some really great things that happened out of it for me, but actually quite a lot of it was a bit of a slog. And I wanted something new and exciting. And I think, as you probably gathered, I'm probably a bit like a little magpie. Like I like nice, new, shiny things. And so then I started what we called an academy. And the idea was that we helped different people understand their balance a little bit better, because obviously with everyone working from home, not really knowing what your priorities were, helping people to identify what their priorities are and how to move forward from that. Another little side hustle started to kind of come about then as well. And we're now in the third kind of cohort of our academy. So from what happened to me leaving my full-time job 5 years ago, I am now in a situation where I have what I would consider one business and 2 side hustles. Now, the problem is, or the good thing is, depending on which way you look at it, one of my side hustles has now become a lot bigger than my main job in the first place. So I run a coaching development company called No More But. That's been going around for quite a few years now. Stress Matters has got much bigger in terms of my attention, but also the team that works on it, and of course the impact that we have because of things like the last year that's happened, and of course the importance of it. So what was very much my side hustle, as in I'd spend a few hours a week in it, has now flipped over into, in essence, my near enough full-time job whilst I'm trying to keep No More Buts going. And then, because I like to make my life as challenging as possible, I then started the Be Do Academy last year. And so that, in essence, for me, is my newest side hustle. And I've got this ridiculous situation now where I'm trying to balance 1 or 2, depending on what you want to look at it as, my kind of main companies, and then a side hustle. And as I said, because I like new shiny things, there's definitely a couple of other things in the back of my head that I'm like, who would be quite good side hustles? I need to think about them as well. So I wanted to share that with you, just to give you a little bit of context of why I'm here talking to you about side hustles. So serial entrepreneur, wearer of many hats, somebody that just cannot sit still and do one thing at a time. There are lots of different ways to describe my approach to business, but I really enjoy this idea of a side hustle. And I think for me, it takes the pressure off what it is you're trying to achieve when you call it a side hustle. Because I think sometimes if you think, I want to start a business, for example, actually it feels a lot scarier than if you think about a side hustle. And there's research to suggest that actually by 2030, Henley Business School reckon that 50% of us will have side hustles. So actually, this is something that's growing and growing and growing. And not surprisingly, with last year that we've had, there's lots of people where actually that side hustle that might have been a very small proportion of their time and income actually has ended up for some people their only one. So they've kind of ended up, if they've lost jobs, for example, that side hustle has picked up. So the whole world has changed a little bit now when it comes to our approach to work. So I have some tips for you. As I said, these are definitely not things that I'm going to claim that I have done every single time. So please don't be alarmed that I've done all these things very thoroughly and very rigorously, and therefore that's how these things have come about. These are, as I said, some of the things that I have done, some of the things I wish I had done, and I will try and share that as we go. But hopefully for you that are on the very, very beginning of your journey, hopefully you can take some kind of learning from some of the things that maybe I didn't do quite so well. So the first one is a really big one. Of does anybody know what the difference is between a hobby and a side hustle? Anyone happy to share with me what you think it is?
Make money out of the side hustle?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, simple as. Pretty easy definition. Thank you. So we have, some of us have hobbies, some of us don't. But that's generally the definition, is what do you make money out of? Now, unfortunately, sometimes we can have what we consider to be a side hustle and still not make money out of it. So I could have either looked at my Stress Matters journey as me having a hobby for a year and a half of trying to improve workplace wellbeing, or actually that then became a side hustle. So it's not necessarily when you're making money out of it. I would also say it's the opportunity to make money, because as with any business, sometimes you're not going to make money at the start. So it doesn't mean it's still a hobby. It means that you're working towards a business making money. But that is one of the defining things, is can you make money out of your hobby? Okay. And it doesn't always have to start from a hobby, but quite often we can merge the two things. So my first tip for you is think about what you like doing, not what you love doing. Okay, so quite often when we think about, oh, actually, I quite like to make a little bit of money on the side, or I'm really enjoying doing jigsaws, maybe I should try and make a business out of jigsaws, or whatever it is. Actually understanding what it is that you like about that that kind of situation, that service, that product, whatever it is, and asking yourself, if you took that to doing it 50 hours a week, would you still like it or not? And that's where it can sometimes be a bit dangerous when we start thinking about the things that we love becoming our side hustle. Because actually, if we love it, is it because it's a break from work? Is it our work, rest and play? Actually, are we the kind of person that needs to have those three things quite separate, or are we happy for them to be merged? So actually understanding for you why you have hobbies, and if those hobbies are things you're considering doing into a side hustle, actually what the difference is for you between work, rest and play when it comes to hobbies. But I also imagine there'll be some of you thinking, well, actually the side hustle I'm thinking about, and of course with mine as well, doesn't necessarily come out of a hobby. Does it have to? No, it doesn't have to at all. What we need to do is actually not to make any assumptions about things that we are keen to do. So my second tip for you is thinking about what you're interested in and what you like, what you might be good at as well, because sometimes we might really enjoy something and we might like it, but we're not necessarily the best at it. And the most important thing that we can't make assumptions on is what people will actually pay. So you might be very, very passionate about a particular thing, but actually if people aren't going to pay you for that skill or for that service, actually it probably isn't going to be a side hustle. Now, how many people here have watched Great British Bake Off? Most people, yeah. And how many of us at some point have considered becoming a baker? Generally, there's a bit of a yes, probably, maybe not, I'm not doing it because they're far better than me. Now, the thing is, when Bake Off got launched, I think it was a couple of years after. So the first few years it was on whatever channel it was on, and then it moved and it got a bit more mainstream. Apparently, the number of bakeries, or the number of people starting to consider themselves as bakers, rose by 1,500%. And they put that down to the Great British Bake Off. Okay, it wasn't just a coincidence. They put it down to the Great British Bake Off. Now, if you imagine, if you've got a marketplace and you've got 1,500% increase in the number of businesses offering that service, the likelihood of you being able to make money from it is probably relatively slim. Now, I don't know what the numbers are in terms of how many of those bakers or bakeries are now surviving now. I've got no idea. But I'm going to imagine not all of them. And I don't think that's probably too harsh a guess in that area. So what happens is quite often when we think about we're really enjoying something, we really like doing something, yes, somebody will totally pay for that. But actually quite often they won't, or there are so many other people doing the same thing that actually why would they buy from you? So what can quite often happen, taking bakery as an example, is actually you might sell some cakes to some friends of yours, some family members, and that might be your limit. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's still a side hustle, but it's actually maybe a kind of contained size that's only ever going to go. And then we've got to think about scale, how big we want this side hustle to go. Do we want it just so that it's something interesting to do, or do we want to actually make a big business out of this? Now, there's stats to say that actually you can make about £6,500 after tax from side hustles on average. Now, some of them are a lot bigger, some of them a lot smaller, but actually there is money to be made in a side hustle. But of course, there's a lot of effort that needs to go into it as well. So my next tip for you is think about your strengths. So as I said, it's not just what you like doing and what you're good at. It's actually, do you think you have the skills to set up a side hustle business? Because that's what we're talking about with side hustles. We're generally talking about setting up a business. So it doesn't matter what format that business is in. But as I said, it's taking it from that hobby or that voluntary or that just general interest to that next level. So I know, for example, that I have zero strengths in VAT, corporation tax, accounting, not my area. I would like to think if I spent time on it, maybe I could get a little bit better at it, but it is not my strength. It is not my interest. And it's the same with social media. Again, it's not my strength. I don't play naturally into that area. Now, when we're thinking about setting something up on our own, actually the tendency is we do everything ourselves because we don't have to pay ourselves. So actually it makes it a lot more effective if we try and do everything ourselves. Now, what I would suggest, that might be slightly different to some people, is I would encourage you to think about what you're good at, really appreciate those areas that you're not so strong at, and try and outsource them as quick as you can. Because if you think about your side hustle, hopefully you're trying to set up a side hustle with something you actually really enjoy and you find really interesting. So if you then spend half of that time that you've committed to your side hustle doing stuff that you really dislike and stuff that you are not good at, it's really going to impact your motivation to do the rest of the side hustle. Now, I appreciate there's the balance of if you've got, there's only so much cash we all have, and paying an accountant, for example, or paying someone to do your social media might not seem like a priority at once. But actually, if you're really committed to your side hustle making money, trying to make it as enjoyable and as easy for you to actually commit the time it needs, that determination, by removing some of those more challenging areas, means that you're much more likely to actually commit to that time. Because if you find, in my case, I'd say for about 6 months, I tried to do the social media and I did an appalling job at it. I just was not good at it, not interested in it. So it put me 6 months behind in terms of my social media. Yes, it in theory saved me 6 months worth of social media support money, but actually I probably had to pay for that multiple times over now to play catch up on where actually the opportunity was for us to go. So thinking actually if this is a proper, legitimate, viable business option that you're considering, be really clear really early on what your strengths are. And it might be you've got friends and family that can do things for free for you. So that's of course even better than spending money, but don't try and do everything. You are not going to be strong at everything. So think about writing your own SWOT analysis. You may have done it for work, you might have done it for a project. Think about what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. And then most importantly, when it comes to side hustles, think about those opportunities and threats. So what are the things that are going to stop you being able to achieve everything you could with your side hustle, and think about actually what opportunities are. Now that might be people, that might be the situation in the moment. I know, for example, whilst I was spending more time on No More Spots at the beginning of last year, with everything that happened in COVID, the opportunity in terms of focus on workplace wellbeing and mental health was huge come March. Actually, it made total sense for me to switch my time into stress matters where that opportunity was, rather than constantly focusing on No More Spots as my priority. So being really aware of those opportunities and threats around you. And then my next tip for you is thinking about using your network. So actually, we sometimes when we think about our networking, I know I've done lots of networking sessions with people, and we do networking workshops, and people quite often hate it. Some people like it and really enjoy it and see the benefits of networking, but a lot of us find it really hard, really awkward. And when we're in this time right now, it's even more challenging, isn't it? Trying to network online is actually really hard. And so if you're trying to think about a side hustle, you've really got to spend some time thinking about your network. Now, depending on what your side hustle is in, it might be something that's completely separate to what your day job is. And that tends to be the case for most people's side hustle. So actually, a lot of the people you know, it might be very easy to dismiss and say, well, they don't have the skills or the knowledge that I need because actually they work in architecture or finance rather than whatever it is that my side hustle's in. But actually, what we tend to forget when it comes to networking is actually it's much more about who those individuals know rather than who they are. Okay. So when you look at your network, whether or not that's on your phone, in your email contact list, on LinkedIn, on social media, wherever it ends up being, looking at your network and thinking about your network, it's not necessarily about who they are and what they bring to support you. It's about who they might know as well. And the other important thing is that kind of saying about it's about who you know. Actually, it's about what you do with who you know. So it's all very well having a fantastic, incredible LinkedIn profile with thousands and thousands of connections on there. But if you're not connecting with them on a real level, actually that network is just a group of names on a computer. Okay, so you need to be reaching out to your network as much as possible. Now, there's no point just reaching out to a network for the sake of it. You've got to have a plan when it comes to reaching out to your network. So thinking about those people in your network and who they might know, are they the kind of people that might be really useful for research? So as I said before, it's really important to think about actually how viable a business opportunity is this in terms of will people pay for it? Now, LinkedIn, for example, social media might be a really good place to start asking and doing some research on that. So actually, can you use your network for research? It might be you want to use your network for potential clients or customers. So actually thinking about your network in terms of that. So if you have the opportunity, try and segment your network, your audience a little bit to find out actually how you can talk to them and get the most out of them. Now, one caveat I would give is, particularly if you're thinking about a new product or new service, new business that you want to offer, try not to go out to the individuals in your network too soon. Because sometimes it's really tempting just to blurt something out on social media, going, hey, I've got this really cool idea. What do you reckon? Now, yes, you can class that as research. But the thing is, if you have a conversation with somebody and it's not a fully fledged idea, and they don't like the sound of that first version of the idea, the likelihood of them listening the second time is probably pretty slim. So you need to pick who you're going to speak to with your research and potentially have them as separate people to the people that you're going to take your business idea to, whether or not that's selling a product or setting up a bigger corporation and approach. So think carefully about who the different people in your network are and what you're going to use them for as different kind of categories or criteria. As I said, what we can find is that actually people will get very quick on the mark of, I need to go and ask people stuff, and it misses the opportunity for them to have a slightly more polished, well thought through presentation or conversation with somebody moving forward. So put yourself in your network, think about who you know, think about the fact that if a friend of yours said, would you mind just spending 20 minutes chatting to me about something? The likelihood is we'd probably say yes. So let's ask our friends and family and our peers as well, because the likelihood is they'll probably say yes. So use your network. It's there for a reason. And actually, you're really often surprised about what comes around. I know there's a vast amount. I guess probably over 80% of the work that we do for each of the three businesses comes from networks and word of mouth. So actually, there is very little kind of outgoing promotion and marketing and things like that we do. You know, for example, one of the reasons I'm here today to talk to you is the fact that I know the Museum of Brand through lots of the work I do with Unique Venues of London. And I know about Unique Venues of London through a company who I coach their team for. So our networks extend out in different ways. And the more we can appreciate the power of it and actually do something with that power, the better it is. Because it's all very well to know it, but there's a very big difference to knowing that our network's important and actually taking steps. Give you one kind of slightly more practical idea. When I was slightly quieter at some point last summer, I decided to take a bit of my own advice and go through my LinkedIn connections. So I, in a very old school way, printed out all of my LinkedIn connections on paper because I'm a fan of the old school. And I got myself a ruler and a coloured pen. And I went through name by name each of those people that I was connected with in alphabetical order and reached out to a lot of them and said, hey, like, I'm not commuting at the moment. I thought I'd use the time to reconnect with people. Can we have a coffee? The level of people that came back and said, yeah, it'd be great to have a coffee. I haven't heard from you in 5 years. I haven't heard from you in years. How are things? What's going on? I never got beyond the letter C. Now, maybe that's just because I got a bit distracted, but realistically, it's because so many calls and came out of just A to C on my LinkedIn connection that I didn't have the time to go further than C. So you'll be surprised about who will say yes to a coffee if you ask them, particularly at the moment, because actually, yes, a lot of us are busier, but also a lot of us have slightly more time as well. So you never know until you ask. So just ask someone for a coffee. You'll be so surprised about the amount of people that will actually say yes. Okay, so my next tip for you then is create accountability. Now, this can be done through your network, of course, but this is a different way of doing it as well. So when we think about accountability, this is really important to me. So as a coach, accountability is really important. So I work with my clients, and we all in the team work with our clients to create accountability to make sure that if our client wants to achieve something, we help them achieve it. So I know the power of having somebody else to kind of bounce ideas off and keep you accountable to making change. So much so that the stress matters, it's our second pillar. We have three pillars in the way we do business in Stress Matters. It's all about gathering insight, creating accountability, and then providing support. So accountability for me is really, really core in business generally and in life, but in particular when it comes to side hustles, because it's really easy to be tired. It's really easy to come up with an excuse. Now, what I would challenge and say is if you keep finding yourself coming up with excuses about not committing to that side hustle, maybe it's not the right side hustle for you. And actually, you've got like the idea of a side hustle, maybe more than the idea you're thinking. So we tend to be able to find time if it's something we really want to do. But it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to use that time effectively. So having an accountability partner, whether or not as a coach or a mentor, or just a colleague, a friend, a family member, somebody that you can say out loud to, I'm committing to do this by next month, for example. There is stats to show you, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there are stats to show that if we write something down, the likelihood of us achieving it is a certain level. But when we say it out loud and we agree with other people, that likelihood increases. So it's all very well saying, right, I'm giving myself a task list, I'm going to achieve these things. But actually, if you commit to somebody verbally, the likelihood of you doing it is much, much greater. I know Francie and I were talking about PTs before you all joined our call. And I know that when I had a PT, I would never miss a training session because I was accountable to that person. It's very much how I normally describe coaching as well. You might know what to do in the gym or with whatever equipment you've got near you. You might know you might know roughly what your goals are. But actually having somebody that's accountable, that shows you the kind of the tips and the techniques just to tweak that style to mean that you can get the best out of it, but for you to have to show up for makes a really big difference when it comes to achieving results. And obviously in this context, in terms of side hustle results rather than PT sessions. So having that accountability is really important. Now, there's also different ways you can do it. So some people have accountability groups. And so actually that moves into what I'm going to say in a moment in terms of tribes, of finding your tribe. But it doesn't matter whether or not it's one person or 5 people. It doesn't matter how many people you feel accountable to. But some of us, if anybody's ever heard of Gretchen Rubin, or if you're interested in reading, Gretchen Rubin has a book called 4 Tendencies. She has a quiz online that you can take that takes kind of a couple of minutes to complete. And one of the things that comes out of that is it tells you what tendency you have. And what we mean by that is whether or not you're more likely to meet somebody's expectations if they're external or if they're internal. So rather than going into all of it for you, I'll leave that for you to go and find out more. But to put it into context for you, I'm what they call an obliger. And what that means is I'm far more likely to do something if I tell somebody else, if I do it for somebody else, sorry. So if I say to myself, I'm going to go for a walk, probably not going to do that because I'm not as good at meeting my own expectations. If I told my husband or a friend or a family member, let's go for a walk, there is no way I would not do that. Okay. So for me, I am an obliger. Now, not everybody's the same. So go on there, have a little go at the quiz and you'll find out what you are. But when we know our tendency, it can really help with our accountability. So I know for me that actually, because I'm an obliger, because I do things that other people tell me, I feel committed to do them because I've told other people I'm going to do them, I then do them. So for me, as an obliger, which the vast majority of us are, actually it's really helpful having an accountability partner. So it doesn't matter how early stage your side hustle is, find yourself an accountability partner. Doesn't matter if you've barely got anything to tell them yet, they will keep you on track. And it might be they're trying to set up a side hustle too. So I would welcome you to maybe pop yourself in the chat if you are interested in finding an accountability partner. And maybe there is somebody else on this call who would like to be your accountability partner. It doesn't necessarily have to be a friend. It can be somebody you've never met before, but somebody that actually will keep you on track. You say you're going to do it, you do it. So I'd love it if any of you guys want to become each other's accountability partners. And of course, if anybody wants me as accountability partners, obviously part of what we do anyway. So as I said, finding your tribe. So this is a really useful one. So one thing that I found really helped me right at the very beginning when I was setting up my business, first business, was finding out from my local council what networking support was around. So back in the days when we could do old-fashioned networking, I went to the council and I said, okay, what do I do when I'm trying to set up a business? I've never done it before. They had some great grants and things available, but what they also did was put me in contact with a couple of local networking groups. Now, I was not a fan of them. I probably lasted about a month going to these networking groups. They were not for me. They weren't the kind of people that I wanted to spend a huge amount of time with, apart from 4 women that I met at one of my first networking groups. Now, these 4 women, I still talk to regularly, and this is 5 years later. And we just created our own little tribe. Now, call it accountability, but I would say it's probably slightly more about the stage of our business rather than actually holding each other accountable. The reason that the 5 of us kind of gelled so much is we'd all started our business within about 2 months of each other. We do very, very different businesses, but actually there was a sense for us that we weren't alone because there were other people that got the idea of just starting a business and those growing pains that you then experience later on in business as well. So for me, finding your tribe isn't necessarily about accountability. It's about finding those people that get it and that they understand you and what it is you're trying to achieve. So they don't have to be people that hold you accountable. They're people that make you feel good and the people that you can go to and ask questions of if you're worried about something. So I had it a while ago when I was going to hire my first team member. I was like, I've hired team members before in my previous world, but actually, how do the rest of my tribe, how are they approaching it? Have any of them done it yet? So reaching out to those people just to get that bit of extra support and advice, just because those people, as I said, from my side with the kind of business stage was the same as mine, but you might find that you have a slightly different need for your tribe as well. So this tip then is say yes 90% of the time, okay? So one of the things that happens is we quite often get scared and we say no. Quite often, particularly when it comes to side hustles, because it's really easy for us to say, I haven't got time, so I'm not going to take that opportunity. But you genuinely never know what is going to happen from something. And I am such a big believer of saying yes, because you just don't know where it's going to lead you. Now, the reason I don't say yes to everything is because there's nothing wrong with doing that to start with, but I think we do also have to be respectful of our own time and our own well-being. But we can't necessarily say yes to every single thing. And sometimes we just know in our heart of heart that there is just nothing that's going to come from that opportunity. But saying yes far more often than you say no really does give you an extra boost. Now, one of the things that it does, not only is it opens up new people, new situations, actually one of the things it also can do is really help with if you struggle with imposter syndrome. So for anybody that has imposter syndrome, it can be a really, really big issue. And for some people, it's just something they kind of manage on a day-to-day basis. But that kind of concept that I'm not good enough to do something, I can't do it, there are people better placed at it than me. And when we come to setting up a side hustle, quite often that's a really overwhelming feeling for us that, well, why would anyone want to buy it if I'm doing it? Actually, other people out there are better than me. Well, maybe they are. But actually, you are you, and you're going to have your own SWOT analysis that you can bring to the table. But by saying yes to things, it means people are actually asking you to do things. So actually, when we think about imposter syndrome, that boost of confidence that we can say, well, somebody's asked me to talk at an event, for example, or asked me to sit down with them and go through their finances. Now, I'm not the best at finances, but I suppose I know a little bit. Fine, I'll help them. You never know where those yeses go to. And I could give you countless examples of when I've said yes, where it's then taken me. Not only kind of business-wise, but actually growth of opportunities wise as well. Just never know. And at the beginning of a business, quite often we feel like we need to do things for free a lot. And yep, we're going to have to do that. I'm afraid that's what happens in side hustles. Sometimes we have to do stuff for free, but actually there will become a point where you don't have to do things for free anymore. And actually you can take it up to that level and say, well, yes, I am going to do it. But no, I'm not going to do it for free. This is how much I'm going to charge you for something. So it's a really empowering thing to get your head around at the very, very beginning of the journey is what can I say yes to? And what do I really probably need to say no to as well? Okay, so scheduling your time. So this is a really big one. So of course, as I said, it's Easy to say, yeah, sure, I'm going to do a side hustle. It's going to be great. I'm going to suddenly take over the world with my new business idea. This is going to be what happens. But the problem is we all have a pretty finite amount of time in the day. Now, the stats that I found before were, on average, people that do a side hustle actually do 6 to 15 hours a week on their side hustle. Okay. So if you think you've only got an hour a week to spend your side hustle, just be aware the level and speed of growth probably won't be great. Okay. So you can still do it in an hour a week, but it's probably pretty limited. Now, when we think about going up to the next level, 20% of people actually spend 16 to 20 hours a week on their side hustle. Now, I'm not saying now you need to find 20 hours a week to commit into your side hustle, but we need to be conscious of the fact that actually it can take a decent chunk of time. So we need to be really clear with ourselves about how much time we have, where we're taking that time from, and give yourselves a plan. So actually, again, it comes a bit into accountability. If you want to spend 2 hours a week on it, when are those 2 hours going to happen, and where are those 2 hours coming from? What would you normally be spending your time on? So be really clear with yourself about how you're going to schedule your time and put it into your diary if you have a diary. Okay, so the final couple now, track your resources. So this is a big one that tripped me up a little bit at the beginning. And with each of my side hustles, I've still not learned this properly. So please take my learning and you guys do it properly from the start. Every time you spend 20 quid, 10 quid, £3 on a cup of coffee, having a conversation with somebody about your side hustle, bank that money as an expense, okay? Keep a track of every single penny and pound that you spend on what potentially is going to be your side hustle. Now, it might be that side hustle doesn't come off, and actually that's just money you've invested. But if your business comes off, you might be able to reclaim that back because they're all costs of setting up your business. So try to keep a track of it, but it also helps you not only for potentially claiming it back, also gives you a sense of how much you're spending on that business idea. And if you can, my suggestion would be to track not only your money, but your time on it. So it can be really useful to go, how many hours have I spent trying to do this now and I don't seem to have moved it forward? Or actually only spent 3 hours and look how much I progressed in that time. So really trying to understand your resources. And then the final tip for you is know your why. So really remind yourself about why you want a side hustle. Is it about money? Is it about releasing those creative genes? Is it just because actually you want something to say, hey, up yours to your current employer? Whatever it is, your why, remember that constantly while you're doing it. Because actually, if it's to give yourself a better work-life balance, for example, and you find yourself working more hours than you've ever worked and more stress than you've ever worked, then look at it again and say, why am I doing this? This is not necessarily helping me with what I'm trying to do. If it's not making you any money, even if you really enjoy it, if the purpose of you doing it was to make money, again, question why you're doing it. So be clear with yourself right from the very beginning about why do you want a side hustle? What is the reason you want it? And have that somewhere in a notebook or somewhere prominent for you to remind yourself that you start veering off that path, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to get back on it. So just to recap then, think about what you like, not necessarily what you love. Don't make assumptions. Know what your strengths are and ideally what your whole SWOT analysis is. Use your network and create accountability, whether or not it's from that network or from a more individual basis. Find your tribe so you don't feel like you're on your own. People are going through the journey at the same time as you. Say yes to 90% or whatever percent you feels right to you, but more yeses than nos. Schedule your time, so make sure you find the time to do things that you want to do. Track the pennies and track those costs of resources as well. And remember your why. So they are my top kind of tip for you as to side hustles.